All right, welcome back. We are going to go through question 7 of the AAMC Preview Practice Test review. Once again, if you haven't watched any videos before this, please at least go back and watch the first video. You'll get a bit more introduction to the framework we're going to be using to answer these questions. And if you haven't done question 7 yet, before we go over it, please go ahead and do that, as doing these questions beforehand and understanding and thinking about your own thought processes and reflecting on them is the best way to learn and get the most out of these practice questions. Okay, and comparing your thinking versus the thinking we're going to use in this video, and yeah, once you do that, I think that's the best way to learn. Especially, we have a limited amount of material for this exam, so yeah, please do that. And let's just jump right into question number 7. We have 6 responses to go through. All right. Scenario 7. You are speaking with a patient who recently immigrated to the United States. The patient is undergoing minor surgery and asks you to contact their family in their home country if anything unexpected occurs. All right, the patient shares the customs that should be followed when someone dies and asks you to ensure that those customs are respected. Okay, so clearly, the first thing I'm kind of seeing here is that a patient is asking us, they're requesting us to do something, right? They have a request. So as a good provider, hopefully we can find a way to take steps to ensure that concern and that request is fulfilled. All right. But the main problem that I'm kind of seeing, and remember, at every question we do, we want to kind of summarize it into one main problem. The main problem here, this scenario is pretty straightforward, that a patient wants their customs to be respected by the hospital if they die during the surgery, right? And they're requesting that steps be taken to ensure that their customs are respected. Okay, so let us jump into 7.1. Tell the patient that because the surgery is minor, it is not necessary to worry about the customs. Okay, so where do we start? Remember, we've used these 2 questions so far, and let's focus on the latter one, and we'll add some more hopefully over time, but these questions do a good job of allowing us to make an initial differentiation of which answers are probably going to be right and eliminate 2 answers that are not going to be right. Okay, so are you taking steps to resolve the main problem? Is this response taking steps to resolve the problem of our patient requesting, putting a request for their customs to be respected? And clearly this is not, right? In fact, we're just dismissing the request, right? We're saying, oh no, don't worry, those requests, it's not necessary. Don't worry about this, which, in fact is just outright dismissing their concern. So we're not offering steps to address this problem in the slightest. All right, so 1 or 2, very ineffective or ineffective. How do we differentiate between the 2? Let's see what we've looked at in the past. To what extent are you recognizing there's an issue, offering a solution, or relinquishing responsibilities? Are there any overt consequences? Are we disengaging? Are we precluding further discussion? Are we being rude or disrespectful? And I'm going to add here, just as a, foreshadowing, what this answer is going to be. I'm going to add dismissive here. I spelled that. Dismissive. Oh, are you prioritizing? I think it's 1S. Dismissive. Okay. Sorry. Are you prioritizing your needs over the needs of others? What are the likelihood of causing a problem? Okay. So if you kind of summarize all these, yeah, we're disengaging from the problem. We're not addressing it. We're not offering any solution. We're not barely recognizing there's an issue at all. We're not helping our patient in the slightest. This is going to be a very ineffective answer. And we're being rude, right? This is a very rude response that's not going to go over well with the patient. All right. All right, let's move on to 7.2. All right, 7.2. Tell the patient that you will respect the customs, but that you cannot guarantee the actions of other hospital staff. Okay, this is a little bit better than our previous answer. We're definitely not dismissing the issue and we're agreeing to follow it, but we're not really figuring out or taking steps in order to ensure other people follow it. And if other people don't follow it, then their customs ultimately aren't respected. So, that's not going to be a 4 either because of that. And although you are taking steps, so to me, this is kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm just going to triage this into a 2 or a 3 response. Okay, so how do we differentiate between a 2 or a 3 response? Are we taking responsibility for solving the problem? Not really, right? We're not really taking responsibility for solving the problem. We are kind of like, hey, I'll follow it, but anyone else probably not going to follow it. So we're not helping our patient in any way to address the issue apart from, us simply following it. We're not really offering a solution to his problem either. To their problem. Simply because if, it's true we can't guarantee the actions of others, but although if we aren't going to take steps in order to make sure that something can be done to help our patient, and we're not really offering a solution either, right? And hearing this as a patient, how are we impacting relevant stakeholders? How is our patient going to feel when they hear us say this, that we can't guarantee the actions of others? Well, they're not going to feel good. It's going to distress them. They're not going to feel heard or like they're being helped. For all those reasons, this is going to be a 2 response. All right. All right. 7.3. Suggest the patient share their request with other hospital staff to ensure the customs are respected by everyone. Okay, so let's go back to, are we addressing the main problem, right? Are we taking steps to, let's go back to how we're going to make our initial differentiation. Are you taking steps to resolve the main problem? I'd say we are, right? We are taking steps to resolve the main problem. We are telling the patient, we're suggesting to them that if you do this, your customs could be respected by everyone. Okay. I think, this crosses the line that it does provide actionable steps, tangible steps that the patient can take in order to ensure that their customs are respected. So I'm going to move this into a 3 or a 4. All right, so let's see. You can take a second, you can read you can read all these questions. Remember, they're all not going to be applicable because we've compiled them from the other questions we've done so far. So totally they're not. And you know what? I'm also realizing we had this question twice here. I didn't even realize that. Okay, so I'm gonna take that one out. But take a second to read these. Very clearly though, I'm gonna say is if we focus on the second question, how are we impacting any relevant stakeholders? How are we impacting our patient by this response? What we are definitely doing is putting a burden on them, right? We are telling them, hey, if you tell everyone in the hospital that, respect our customs, your customs will be respected. Although that is a pathway to a solution, burdening our patient with this task is not going to make this a very effective solution, simply because our patient's already distressed, right? They're already having to go through this surgery, and putting more tasks onto them when we could be the ones to take this request to other hospital staff, that's going to lead this into just an effective solution. It's very important, whether it's another group mate or another person struggling or someone who's asking for help or a patient, that we try not to burden them with things that they don't need to be burdened with, because it's only going to, for this test, only going to make our response less likely to improve the situation. And they're already going through all this. it might be harder for them to share this request with other staff as opposed to us sharing their request with other staff members, and therefore less likely to improve the situation, and therefore it's going to be a 3. All right. .4. All right. Tell the patient that you will ask whether the hospital will be able to honor the patient's request. Okay, this is very similar to the last response, right? That we're kind of taking our and we're providing a tangible action plan that it's going to take a step towards making sure that this problem is potentially resolved, right? We're taking a very actionable step that, and in my mind, we're doing even better than the previous question, right? And I'm not saying that we should grade this question relative to the previous question, but one thing we are doing better here is that we are the ones taking the patient's request to the hospital, right? We're not burdening them. But I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. For our initial differentiation, are we taking steps to resolve the main problem? Clearly, we are taking steps, right? Because if we go to the hospital and ask how this can be fulfilled, this is a step towards fulfilling our patient's request. So how do we differentiate between 3 or 4? You can go back and look through those questions we laid out before, but I'm going to tell you that this is going to be a very effective response, particularly because we're not burdening our patient this time, right? And this is more likely going to improve the situation because it's a step towards finding an action plan towards making sure our patient's wishes and customs are fulfilled. All right. So for that reason, this is going to be a 4. Let's move on. .5. All right. Discuss the patient's request with your supervisor and ask how to proceed. Okay, so remember, for our initial differentiation, are we taking steps to resolve the main problem? And very clearly we are, right? We're asking our supervisor, someone who might know more than us on how to, the hospital's protocols on how to make sure our patient's wishes are respected. We clearly don't know how to do it. And discussing with our supervisor is a step towards resolving this problem. Okay, so let's go back. And how do we differentiate between a 3 or 4? You can, read these. To me, a very clear and the most relevant question here is, are we taking actionable steps to improve the situation? And we kind of hinted at this before. Definitely don't memorize this, but when we ask supervisors, people who are trusted authorities, and we can tell that they're trusted authorities and they're not just like, random classmates, when we ask them to help us in situations, it's likely going to be very effective. Definitely don't memorize that, but it's often, at least from this practice test, that AAMC likes that approach, right? It likes to see students who can ask questions, can talk with supervisors, and when they're in a pickle, this is often a good way to get out of it, right? So this is going to be a very effective response. I'm going to say this one more time. Why is it a very effective response? Just because I want to emphasize it really clearly. It's because it will significantly improve the situation, because it's very likely to significantly improve the situation because it's a very actionable step, and our supervisor is likely going to know what to do or, who to ask next. So it's a good step towards resolving the main problem. 7.6, last question. Let's knock it out. Tell the patient you will try to find another student who is more familiar with their culture. Okay, so just initially, this question kind of reminds me of 4.3, scenario 4, question 3, where we asked, remember we had a patient who had social needs that weren't being met. They didn't have any visitors, and they were talking to us about their career. And in question 4.3, our response was to find another student to visit our patient. And we rated that one ineffective, right? And why did we rate that one ineffective? Well, it's because we were relinquishing our responsibilities for caring for the patient, right? And we were kind of pawning off our patient onto someone else, another student who, probably has their own kind of workload, in front of them. But for this question, it's kind of ringing a similar bell. And in terms of wording, it's reminding me of that. And what I think is the best way, and just because that happened, it doesn't matter, right? We can get to the same answer from doing what we always do. Remember, we have these questions to make our initial differentiation. Are you fulfilling your responsibilities? Are you taking steps to resolve the main problem? Well, you're taking some steps, right? You're finding someone else who might be more familiar with their culture. Unfortunately, you are giving up your responsibilities for caring for the patient, right? That you are kind of pawning this patient off onto someone else. More importantly, though, who knows if the student can actually even help in the situation, right? Just because they're familiar with the culture doesn't mean they're going to know the hospital protocol. For that reason, we can, initially put this into a 2 or 3. We're not really taking steps to resolve the main problem, right? Because we don't even know if the student can actually help in the situation, right? They're not like hospital administration. Who's going to know how to take the next steps, right? And how do we differentiate between a 2 or 3? Well, let's go back. Are we taking responsibility for solving the problem? No. Somewhat. I guess somewhat. We are finding someone else, but importantly, we are not offering a solution to the main problem because the student we ask, they might not know. There's no real guarantee, and nothing in the question stem that kind of says that they might know, just because they're familiar with the culture. And we're not, importantly also, we're also burdening the other student who probably also has, their workload cut out for them. With all that combined, this is going to be an ineffective answer. Very similarly to 4.3, right? And remember, use the same thought processes, right? Use the same questions and we did use the same questions that led us to both answers, right? Making this initial differentiation and really focusing in on, is this a solution to the main problem? Is this relinquishing or foregoing any of our responsibilities? And unfortunately, this is going to be a number 2 or an ineffective answer. All right, so that's it. That was question 7. Like I say, kind of at the end of all the videos, please like and comment and subscribe. If you have any thoughts on, if you have any further questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them in the comments, or, make a whole nother video specifically answering your questions. Please share if you think this was helpful, and I will see y'all for question number 8.